How's it going, everybody? Thank you once again for stopping by my channel. I want to remind you, if you haven't done so already, to hit that subscribe button and tap that little bell notification thing and hit that big thumbs up, because it really helps my channel out. On today's video, I want to talk about why the Honda Grom deserves the award for Motorcycle of the Decade. And I'm going to go ahead and take you on a nice scenic ride out in the country so I can go over all the reasons why I think this little bike deserves those awards. That award, whatever, multiple awards. We'll say multiple awards. And I have good reasons for it. So let's hop on the bike. We're going to hit some backcountry roads, some nice scenic roads out here in the countryside up here in central Washington. So stick around, let's get going, roll the intro, and we'll ride. Yeah, see, check that out. I got my GPS mounted to my Grom too. The first reason I have for thinking that this bike deserves some sort of award, or at least Honda deserves that award anyways, is because I'm not aware of any bike, motorcycle, over the last God knows how long since the introduction of the, the Cub, the Super Cub back in the 60s. This little motorcycle has gotten so many new riders into the hobby. I mean, it's countless, especially the younger generation of kids. You know, kids just coming up out of high school or in college or something, they need basic transportation. These bikes are so incredibly affordable and easy to ride. They just, you know, something about these little bikes draws that demographic to these things. And it also draws, you know, older people like myself to these little bikes. I mean, the Honda Grom, me stumbling across a video about these bikes is what actually kind of pushed me over the edge to finally buy a motorcycle. And they're also extremely affordable. I mean, you can get one of these little Groms brand new out the door for just over $3,000. And if you're out there looking for a motorcycle to buy, maybe it's your first bike, second bike, third bike, doesn't matter. I mean, almost anybody can afford to own one of these things. Even if you have to finance one, what's your payments, like 70 bucks a month, 75 bucks a month? They're extremely cheap to insure too. I don't even know how much I'm paying for this thing, a few bucks a month, maybe if that. And these bikes are so unintimidating for new riders. Once you sit on one of these bikes and just kind of feel the weight underneath you and you're able to flick it around in a parking lot, it's just like riding a bicycle. I mean, it takes you back to when you were a kid and just farting around in your neighborhood, just cruising around the back roads, cruising through parking lots, going over, you know, little dirt jumps and stuff like that. You can do all that stuff on these little bikes because they're so easy to handle, so easy to throw around. I mean, even if you tip one of them over, you could pick it up by yourself and it's not a big deal. You don't need help to do it. And they're so great for just cruising around on back roads, even out on, you know, out country roads like this, cruising around in town, wherever you want to take them to. As long as it's not interstate speed limits, you'll do just fine. These bikes can do 60 miles an hour if you got a little bit of room for them to stretch their legs. Now, in stock form, when you first pick them up, some might complain that these bikes won't go over 50 miles an hour, and that's kind of true. My bike wouldn't do over 50 miles an hour until I got about 600 or 700 miles on it, and the motors finally started to break in. But then after that, I don't have a problem, you know, hitting 55, 60 miles an hour. That's doable on a day-to-day basis, as long as you're not riding into a strong headwind. So on a day like today, you know, we got probably 5 or 10 mile an hour wind, and I'm heading right into it. This thing will do 55, and it'll hold it there. So they're not dangerously slow, as some people might claim small CC bikes are. These are not dangerously slow. You can keep up with traffic on them just fine. So what is it about the Honda Grom that draws a lot of people into finally picking one of these up for their first motorcycle? Well, you can't deny that among the younger crowd, these things are extremely popular for just getting together with a bunch of friends and riding around town and acting like hooligans, popping wheelies, doing stuff like that. And I think that's actually pretty cool. I mean, if you're going to go out there and fart around on a motorcycle, you might as well do it on something that's this small, because too much throttle is not going to get you into trouble on these. You have to really try to speed on one of these bikes. And it's their small, lightweight, unintimidating size that brings a lot of people into wanting to ride one of these. Now, there's a lot of people out there that say, you know, Groms suck. You know, screw Groms. They're little toy bikes. Yeah, they're toy bikes because they're so much fun to ride. but they don't suck whatsoever. And I'll bet you 99% of the people who say Grom suck have never actually ridden one before. Now I've heard arguments say, well, I'm too tall to ride a Grom, or I'm too fat to ride a Grom. No, you're not. Dude, I'm 6'1", and yeah, while you feel like you're kind of in the bike and on top of the bike, it's not cramped at all for, you know, riding distances of half an hour, 45 minutes to an hour. You know, the regular length of a bike ride. Unless you don't want to go on a big long road trip with one of these things, unless you change out the seat, maybe do a couple of things to make it a little bit more comfortable. But as far as riding around pretty much anywhere you want to go, the little Grom will take you there. But like I said, stay off the interstates, because these things will not do 70 miles an hour. I don't care what the heck you do to them. You might get to 70 miles an hour, but you're not going to hold 70 miles an hour. So this bike is so easy to handle. I know that there are some MSF courses around the country that have adopted these bikes as their de facto learner bikes. A lot of places used to have, or maybe even might still have, some old beat up Honda Rebel 250s, but I think they're probably using the Rebel 300s now, and they're also using the Honda Grom and some, V-Star 250s, stuff like that. Some little dual sport 250s, 200cc motorcycles, but I think they recognize that these bikes are so incredibly easy to ride and learn on that they wanted to incorporate that into their, you know, their classrooms out there in the parking lot, the actual riding part of it. So if any of you have been watching my videos for any given amount of time, you guys know my love for these little mini bikes, and it's not ever going to go away. Matter of fact, when I wanted to buy my Grom at first, I ended up not being able to get one because it wasn't available. I went with the Z125, but after I've owned this bike now for, I guess it's been a year and a half, maybe 2 years now. Don't have many miles on it, 1590, but I don't think I would ever get rid of this bike. First of all, you won't get much money when you sell these bikes. I mean, you're looking at maybe a couple of $1,000s, something like that. So it's not going to be all that much. So unless you're really hurting for cash, I'm not going to ever sell my Grom. Number two, it's just so fun to ride. I mean, you don't really have to think about, you don't have to plan ahead. Like I've mentioned in other videos, you don't have to think about, you know, can I get out of that parking spot, or am I have to worry about parking down a hill where something might screw me up and I might not be able to get a bigger bike out of this or out of that. It's just so thoughtless. You just hop on a Grom and you just go. It's easy. And another good thing about these bikes is if you do wreck them, the parts are extremely cheap. You can get all brand new fairings for these bikes for like 125 bucks, and that's probably direct from somebody who sends them direct from Honda themselves. Fully painted, factory color, everything. Just stupid cheap to replace parts on these. Speaking of parts, let's talk about some recommended upgrades that I would do. If you're watching this video and you're thinking about buying a Grom, I'll recommend a few upgrades, ones that I have done myself. Now I think these are tasteful upgrades. These aren't, you know, over the top, obnoxious things to do to the bike. This is kind of the stuff that it kind of streamlines the bike and just makes it a little bit nicer looking and a little better performing. Okay, first of all, I want to talk about the throttle tube. Go ahead and buy what's called a quick turn throttle tube for this little motorcycle, because it makes it so much zippier feeling and easier to throttle out and get it up to speed, so you don't have to twist your wrist back as far. Having a little quarter turn throttle tube on these really helps. Next thing would be a 14-tooth front sprocket, and that kind of goes hand in hand with what's called the 12 o'clock Labs Speedo Healer. Now the 14-tooth sprocket, what that does to these little bikes is it makes it so the entire RPM range is usable. These things come factory with a 15-tooth sprocket on them, and you really have to hold that throttle wide open in fourth gear to get it to use up the whole entire rev range. Now with a 14-tooth sprocket on it, it makes it so that the engine revs higher within the speed limit or the mile per hour that you're going, so it makes it more usable. So what I'm saying is, if you have a 15-tooth sprocket on here and your whole entire bike is stock with the stock engine and everything else like that, you're gonna be hard pressed to find the top speed on one of these little bikes. 14-tooth sprocket fixes that. You can get up to top speed and hold it there. Now what goes along with that, what you're going to have to do, I mean, this is by choice, obviously. If you want you know, your miles per hour, your speedometer to read correctly, is get the 12 o'clock lab speedo healer so that you can reprogram the I don't know, the computer or whatever the heck it is that reads out the miles per hour, reprogram the speedometer, we'll just say, so that you're reading the correct miles per hour. So I did that myself after I put the 14-tooth sprocket on here, reprogrammed it, and now my speed on here matches my GPS probably within 1/3 of 1 mile per hour. So the speedometer will read, it'll click up to the next number just slightly before the GPS will. Now the next thing, which I think is a tasteful mod, is basically doing something with the stock blinkers, because the stock blinkers look like big old dumb Shrek ears. So that was one of the first things that I got rid of. And I installed the TST Industries flush mount turn signals on the front, and also the TST Industries integrated tail light, which I think is a really smooth looking piece. And it takes all those, you know, the rear fender that sticks down like a big old whale tail, it gets rid of that, and it takes the rear turn signals and integrates them into one nice neat little package, and it's all LED, so it's much brighter than the factory brake light. And the front turn signals are much brighter now too, although if I have one suggestion, they sell these either in the smoke flavor or the clear lens flavor. I would go with the clear lens because the smoke ones are just really a little bit too hard to see when you're looking straight on at the bike. Okay, now the next tasteful modification I would suggest doing is obviously getting some adjustable levers, you know, so you can control the bike just a little bit easier. It makes it nice and cool. Also, maybe just get some different aftermarket mirrors, because the ones that come on the bike kind of stick up and look kind of dumb. But that's all up to you. It's all what your preferences are and what your tastes are. But those are just a few little suggestions that I would say to do to your Grom if you're planning on getting one. So when you buy a Grom, for some strange reason, they come with 2 different types of tires on them. One brand is good and one brand is bad. Okay, so if you get one of the ones that comes with what's called V rubbers on them, you're probably going to want to replace those ASAP, because those tires do not do good in the wet, especially if it's wet and you go over one of these painted lines on the road. Your bike can lose traction. So, and the tires for these things are cheap. You can get a pair of these tires for what, 60, 70 bucks? I don't know, 100 bucks maybe. They're dirt cheap. You can probably replace them yourself if you're mechanically inclined to do so, or you can take them to the shop and they'll do it for you for about 100 bucks. But just for the peace of mind and the added stability and traction, I would absolutely upgrade the V-rubber tires if your Grom came with them. So Honda Grom deserves an award for the motorcycle of the decade for bringing so many new riders into the hobby. Probably more rider than any other motorcycle out there currently on the market. When did they introduce these things? 2014 or something like that? I wonder what the numbers are. First time riders that actually bought Honda Groms. I bet it numbers in the tens of thousands.